Chinese soldiers preparing for battle.
Xi Jinping said reunification with Taiwan is unstoppable.
As fireworks lit up the sky on New Year's Eve 2025, one message cut through the celebrations with chilling clarity. From Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping didn't offer a holiday greeting. He issued a warning. Taiwan's reunification, he said, was inevitable. The timing was no coincidence. Just 48 hours earlier, China had wrapped up Justice Mission 2025, the most intense military blockade rehearsal Taiwan had ever witnessed. Chinese warships closed in from all sides, simulating port shutdowns, severing supply lines, and practicing how to seal the island off from the outside world. It wasn't a drill meant for Taiwan alone. It was a message to everyone watching. For China's top military planners, the path looked straightforward. The strategy was in place. The forces were mobilized. The timing felt right. But there was one factor Beijing failed to account for. One small nation, roughly 500 miles south of Taiwan, that China believed it had already bullied into silence. And that miscalculation was about to derail everything. But before the Philippines became the unexpected roadblock to China's ambitions, we need to understand why Taiwan matters so deeply to Beijing. Taiwan isn't just a territorial claim for China. It's a wound, a symbol, a promise left unfulfilled. When the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949, the defeated nationalist government retreated to Taiwan, leaving the Communist Party in full control of the mainland. To Beijing, Taiwan became the unfinished chapter of China's national story, an unresolved piece of history that every generation of Chinese leaders vowed to complete. It's the foundation of the One China policy, the ideological pillar that allows no exceptions, no debate, no compromise. But for Xi Jinping, Taiwan is more than national policy. It's personal. He has tied his legacy to reunification, presenting himself as the leader destined to finish what Mao started. He's said it openly. Taiwan will be brought under Beijing's control, and he intends for it to happen during his time in power. The problem, Taiwan has absolutely no desire to join China, and Xi knows the window to force the issue is shrinking. So Beijing began preparing for the worst-case scenario, the military option. What they didn't expect was that their treatment of a smaller neighbor, one they assumed would never stand up to them, would come back to haunt them. Because long before Taiwan became the center of global attention, China spent years pushing the Philippines to the brink. From 2020 to 2022, the South China Sea turned into a maritime battlefield. Chinese Coast Guard ships repeatedly confronted Filipino vessels. They blasted Philippine supply boats with military-grade water cannons. They pointed laser devices at Filipino sailors, temporarily blinding them. They tried to choke off resupply missions to Second Thomas Shoal, sending swarms of ships to intimidate and ram Filipino boats. In March 2021, more than 220 Chinese maritime militia vessels suddenly appeared at Whitsun Reef, well inside the Philippine exclusive economic zone. They simply anchored there, forming a steel wall on the water, daring the Philippines to respond. Manila filed 153 diplomatic protests in a single year. Beijing ignored every one of them. China's message was unmistakable. You're small, you're weak, you don't matter. Filipino fishermen were driven from traditional waters. Their boats were harassed, blocked, and rammed. Meanwhile, the Philippine Navy was operating with aging, Cold War-era ships and only a handful of modern assets. On most days, they couldn't challenge China even if they wanted to. Beijing believed it had broken the Philippines, reduced it to silence. What China didn't realize was that the Philippines wasn't powerless. It was strategic. And the value of this archipelago went far beyond the rich fishing grounds China tried to take from them. Let me show you something that should keep China's military planners up at night. This is the first island chain, a stretch of territory that US and allied strategists have long called the front line of defense in the Pacific. Now look closely at Luzon, the northernmost major island of the Philippines. It sits right in the middle of this chain, only 250 miles from Taiwan. That geography isn't random, it's destiny. If China ever launches an invasion of Taiwan, it has only two realistic routes. 1. Push through the Luzon Strait, the narrow waterway between Taiwan and the Philippines. Or 2. Swing east into the Philippine Sea, adding distance and exposure to their forces. Either way, Chinese ships and aircraft end up operating uncomfortably close to Philippine territory. And if Beijing attempts to blockade Taiwan, cutting off ports, fuel, food, and supplies. They must control the waters south of Taiwan. That puts them on the Philippines' doorstep. The Philippines isn't a spectator in a Taiwan crisis. Geography drafted them into the story, whether they asked for it or not. And the connection goes deeper than maps. More than 150,000 Filipinos live and work in Taiwan, more than from any other Southeast Asian nation. They're factory technicians, caregivers, medical workers, people with families depending on them back home. If war breaks out, those aren't just statistics. They're Filipino lives at risk. The Philippines had every reason to pay attention to Taiwan's fate. They just needed a leader willing to act on it. Then in 2022, the script flipped. June 2022, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. wins the Philippine presidency, and almost immediately he does something his predecessor refused to do. He shifts the country sharply back toward the United States. His first major move? Expanding American access to Philippine bases through EDCA, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. What began as 5 shared bases rapidly grew to 9, and several of these new sites point directly north toward Taiwan. Suddenly, the U.S. military had access to positions that could support Taiwan's defense, rapid resupply missions, early warning systems, and even missile deployments able to target Chinese invasion routes. The Philippines wasn't just protecting its own waters anymore. It was becoming a strategic anchor in the defense of Taiwan. China noticed. China protested. China threatened. Manila didn't blink. By 2023, the Philippines was conducting joint military drills not only with the US but also Japan and Australia, an unprecedented lineup. In 2024, Manila signed a reciprocal access agreement with Japan, Tokyo's first such pact in Asia outside Australia. Soon after, France, Canada, and New Zealand joined with defense cooperation deals of their own. The Philippines wasn't isolated anymore. It was building a network, a coalition. But talking about alliances is one thing. Acting on them was something entirely different. The real shock wasn't happening in Beijing or Washington. It was happening inside the Philippine military itself. And the speed of that transformation caught almost everyone off guard. To understand how dramatic this shift has been, rewind to 2020. Back then, the Philippine Navy was struggling with aging, barely operational ships. The Air Force relied on aircraft that dated back to the Vietnam War era. The defense budget was so limited that the country couldn't even reliably protect its own fishermen from constant harassment at sea. Morale was low, capability was thin, and few regional powers took Manila seriously as a military player. Now jump ahead to 2026, and the contrast is staggering. The United States announced a $2.5 billion military assistance package to the Philippines, spread over 5 years, the largest commitment of its kind in decades. Around the same time, American Typhoon missile systems quietly appeared in northern Luzon for joint exercises. These mobile launchers are capable of firing both anti-ship and land attack missiles with ranges exceeding 1,000 miles. They were meant to be temporary, but do the math. That range puts Chinese naval forces operating near Taiwan squarely within striking distance. And Manila wasn't just hosting allies, it was rearming itself. The Philippines acquired the BrahMos supersonic anti-ship missile system from India, one of the fastest and most lethal cruise missiles in the world. It expanded its fleet of AR-50 fighter jets from South Korea. It commissioned modern frigates and corvettes to patrol contested waters. Japan stepped in with coastal surveillance radar, patrol vessels, and extensive training support. Australia launched 8 major infrastructure projects across 5 Philippine military bases. Even France began conducting freedom of navigation operations alongside Philippine forces in the South China Sea. The result? A military that once looked outdated and overmatched suddenly began acting like a regional force that demanded attention. And here's the irony China never anticipated. Years of pressure, harassment, and intimidation didn't weaken the Philippines. It unified it. Beijing's actions created the political will in Manila for exactly this kind of military buildup. In trying to dominate, China built its own strategic problem, and Beijing knows it. During China's massive Justice Mission 2025 military exercises encircling Taiwan, the message was unmistakable. These weren't just invasion rehearsals. For the first time, Chinese state media openly acknowledged the drills were meant to deter foreign military intervention. That admission says everything. China now understands the Philippines matters. What was once a country Beijing could sideline has become a strategic factor China can't ignore, especially in any scenario involving Taiwan. Any move across the strait now requires accounting for Philippine territory, Philippine bases, and Philippine alliances. So what happens next? President Xi Jinping has declared Taiwan's reunification unstoppable. But the Philippines may complicate that claim in ways Beijing didn't expect. China now faces a difficult choice. It can increase pressure, more harassment at sea, more economic coercion, more diplomatic threats. But every step in that direction pushes Manila closer to Washington, Tokyo, and Canberra. Every provocation strengthens the very coalition, standing in the way of China's Taiwan ambitions. After years of water cannons, blockades, and intimidation, trust is gone. Philippine public opinion has shifted decisively against China. The debate is no longer about if the Philippines will play a role in a Taiwan crisis. The real question now is how big that role will be. And this story is far from finished. Geography already made the first move. The Philippines sits exactly where it matters most. The real question now is whether China's window to take Taiwan is slowly closing, not because of military weakness, but because Beijing spent too many years creating adversaries instead of allies. The country that was once dismissed as too small, too poor, and too weak to matter has turned into a strategic obstacle, one that could complicate everything China hopes to do next. What was supposed to be an easy variable has become a pressure point, and in Beijing, the realization is only just setting in. China may be discovering too late that power doesn't just come from missiles and ships, it comes from relationships. And when those relationships collapse, geography doesn't change, but consequences do. So what do you think? Can the Philippines truly disrupt China's plans for Taiwan? Or is this just the beginning of a much bigger showdown? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.